G'day and welcome to another episode of Perth Property Insider. I'm your host, Jared Mann, and today we're back for part 2 of how to raise financially savvy kids with Lacey Filipich from Money School. Love chatting to Lacey, and in this one, we're going into the ways to keep our kids from making those really big mistakes, some of the major ones that can derail them to look out for. And we're going to also go into some of the ideas around how to effectively pass on our wealth and how much to leave them or not leave them, some of the thinkings around that so that we can prepare ourselves ahead of time. And there's no right or wrongs, but really looking forward to getting Lacey's take on things. Let's go inside.
Welcome to Perth Property Insider, where you will learn how to grow your wealth and improve your life using Perth property. Our show is brought to you by Investors Edge Real Estate, the highly rated and award-winning property management specialists servicing the whole of Perth. Now, here is your host, Jared Mann.
So how can we prevent them going wrong or have some kind of influence? Is there any advice you'd give there?
Well, I'm pretty strong, and I've said it a couple of times now, on do you really want to stop them going wrong? You do need to let them make mistakes. So I think accepting that they're going to make mistakes and accepting that they're going to do things differently from you is part of raising a child. And my mum described it really well. I'm sure she got the quote from somewhere. It's like having your heart walk around outside your body. It's really tough as a parent. You know, you just feel so strongly about wanting to protect them, but you just have to let them make some stuff ups, make some bad choices and learn from them. There are a few things when you really do need to intervene, I think, or at least be pretty strong about, do you understand the consequences here of what you're doing? Things like getting into major debt. And I'm talking about big credit card debt, getting car loans, that kind of stuff. Buying $200 worth of stuff on Buy Now, Pay Later is not going to financially ruin most people. It's when they've gone to 14 Buy Now, Pay Later providers and they've gotten $200 with each one, or they've gotten a credit card to pay off the other credit card, or they're trying some harebrained scheme that exposes them to debt. And I reflect on, there was a young man who was using Robinhood, you know, the United States trading platform. I think he was 19, and that platform allowed you to borrow more than you had. And he thought he'd somehow racked up $750,000 worth of debt and ended his own life.
Yeah,
it turned out to be an error. Okay, so it turned out to be an error, and this young man is gone. So stuff like that, we've got to try really hard to intervene. You might not be able to do that. You must stop this, but we've got to find some way to catch their attention. I think also catastrophic investments. So people who do bad property deals, you'd see people come to you with this sort of stuff sometimes, Jared, because you're taking on big amounts of debt. That's why. So you could invest $100,000 in shares and lose the whole $100,000 and you're not going to go bankrupt, right? You invest $100,000 in property with a loan, you could go bankrupt if it's a bad debt. So that anywhere where there's debt involved, I would be quite strong on trying to guide them. And then I do think there's another major risk that's coming forward that we know happens all over the place, and that is of financial abuse. Now, 1 in 6 women, 1 in 14 men in Australia will experience financial abuse, and it's often accompanied with some kind of violence. 93% of that is perpetuated by men. So it's men doing it to their gay partners, that sort of thing. But some men are also recipients of this. So just because you've got a boy doesn't mean that your child can't be financially abused by their partner, okay? So don't just think that's a problem for people with girls. It's not. But if you suspect there is abuse, any kind of abuse, and that when it's financial abuse will look like, oh, he doesn't want me to get a job, or she doesn't want me to get a job, or they don't want me to have a car, or they've got control of my accounts because I'm so bad with saving, or anything that's about restricting access to money. And often with this also comes a lot of charm and love bombing at the beginning. So if someone is just too charming for words and then they start doing that kind of stuff, that's that early warning signal that this has the potential to be an abusive relationship. If you see your child having that, because they haven't got the world nous that you have, there's lots of reasons why you want to intervene, but from a financial perspective, people being unable to earn their own income and have access to money to leave is the reason why people tend to stay in those relationships or go back to them. And that's what you've got to be really switched on for. And I know people my age in financially abusive relationships. I can't save them. I wish I could, but their families do not understand. And the ones that have left, their families have criticised them or something like that in occasions. So you've got to be really aware that there's this stigma. It's awful. And by the way,
just trapped in marriage that they don't want to be in, or with a partner they don't want to be in, because I never thought of how the finances can be used to do that.
Oh, it's weaponized. And that's part of the control strategy. And the problem is, by the time it gets that bad, often there's some kind of physical violence as well. And that's when it's really bad. But there are certainly people, you will know people right now, Jared, who are being financially abused, and you won't know it. Like, it's really hard to see, because people don't necessarily talk about that stuff, and they feel uncomfortable or embarrassed. Our young people don't know inherently what a healthy relationship looks like until they've seen it. So they might have seen it through you and your partner if you've got a partner at home, but they might not as well, and they might not have understood all that stuff. If they find themselves with someone who absolutely love bombs them, showers them with love at the beginning, and suddenly feel wonderful, and then that person starts using some of those manipulation tactics, it can erode their self-worth, it can erode their mental health, but most importantly, they might find they haven't got money to get away. And so that's where I think a parental intervention is completely justified. That's my take on it.
And I guess if you help them raise them to be, more independent and bring, that self-confidence to their relationship, and hopefully, they're going to be making those decisions right for themselves as well.
Yeah, and if you've been talking about it and built up that trust with them, hopefully they'll be willing to talk to you about it. So it is one of these things, you can't just fix it when they turn 18. You've kind of got to build up. But I also think parents need to think about, you're either going to be a role model, and that's what my mum was for me. I watched what she did and went, wow, I want to do what she does. I want to follow in her footsteps. Or you're an example, like my dad, who I adore, but I will never follow his footsteps financially, because I was like, that's not what I want to do. So whether or not...
comment on the last point there, because my parents may be listening to this podcast, not sure. So.
My dad, bless his cotton socks, completely acknowledges that he's made lots of mistakes with money, and it has been terrible for him. Doesn't stop him trying to give me financial advice, and I smile and nod at him and go, there's no way I'm doing any of that. But that's okay. Know yourself, one of those things. But that's the thing. Whether you're talking to your kids or not, you are already either a role model or an example to them by talking about these things, by bringing it up with them, by explaining your decision-making, by accepting that they're going to make different decisions to you. You're building that influence and trust and accepting them for who they are. And I think when I've seen healthy, adult-child relationships with parents, that's stuff that's been built really early on, and has resulted in them talking to their parents and trusting them more and taking guidance in their 20s, maybe not in their teens when everybody's like, I hate mum and dad, or hate my parent and I just don't want to be listening to you right now because you're wrong about everything. That's normal for everybody, for every part of life. But when they get out of that period and they're into their late teens and 20s, they come back to that relationship if you've built it. So just be aware that it's happening, whether you're conscious about it or not. It's
always hard to know how much sinks in, like money was never really discussed other than negatively at our dinner table growing up, and me and my partner speak about it very openly, and I know Lexi picks up a lot on that. Just not having it a taboo topic, I think, would help a lot of kids where we didn't have it that way. So
absolutely, yeah, and that's pretty standard, right? A lot of that taboo, which is very English, meant that people didn't talk about it around the dinner table. But you obviously watched and listened to other aspects, like you pick it up, right? So yeah, making it open means you've got the best chance of explaining your reasoning for things. And that's more important necessarily than even what you did with the money. It's why you did it, and your child understanding that underlying bit, knowing it's a safe space to ask about money questions. Really important stuff. And if that's a bit uncomfortable for you, please be reassured that the most I've learned about money has been from when my mother reflected on making mistakes. I shouldn't have done it that way. I wish I'd done it this way.
Yeah, talk them through your mistakes. That's a good one.
Yeah, it's a massive thing, because you get to learn from that experience. You don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to make the same mistake. And that vulnerability builds a lot of trust, because they're not pretending. So you don't have to pretend that you're amazing with money. You don't have to pretend that you've got all the answers. So please don't think that just because you say to yourself, I don't think I'm very good with money.
Now need to be an expert and a master yourself. You're on your own journey as well,
Well, exactly. And acknowledging that and explaining to your children that it is a progressive thing, and being able to reflect on what went wrong and change your behaviour is so much more powerful than just being right all the time. Yeah. That's my theory anyway.
No, I like it. This is working for me.
Oh, good. I've made you feel better. Excellent.
Well, that's why I get people along on my podcast, is, to help me as much as our listeners. So,
hey, everyone wins. That's great.
I've got a few more questions for you. Hang in there. So
awesome.
let's say we've built our wealth, and And what are some of the ideas on how much we leave our kids and how to effectively pass it on if we want to and not have it squandered? So I've been thinking more and more to this as I've been becoming more independently wealthy and thinking about, that next generation and what you leave and not leave, or try to anyway. So do you have any thoughts around this?
Oh, yeah, I've got lots of thoughts around this. It's a massive issue.
Our own episode on this one.
I'll try and keep it succinct. But this is a concern that all those ultra wealthy, the ultra high net worth individuals we talk about, the Gina Reinhardts of the world, there's that saying that it takes one generation to build it, one to keep it, and then the third one to lose it. It's the biggest thing that they worry about, is this generational decline. The third generation is the one that loses it. So if you're the one that's building it, there's a good chance that your child will be able to sustain that. And then the rule of thumb is that the next one might lose it. But people that focus on this a lot now and try to build up the skills so that that doesn't happen. I think there's a few schools of thought here, and then none of them are right or wrong particularly. This is such a personal decision. So there's no judgment on anyone for whatever you choose here. And I saw recently Daniel Craig, the actor who does James Bond and all that, said, no, that's my money. My kids don't get any of that. So he set the expectation with his children. No, I earn that money, not you. You get none. So that's an option. It's perfectly fine. I don't think you owe an adult child anything.
I've seen Shaq do it as well.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
His son was like talking about, my house, my car. No, mine. Don't
mine.
You?
Yeah, exactly.
You need to go and work on getting your own, son.
And so that's certainly an option. And as far as I'm concerned, it's a legitimate option. So people who go like, oh, that's not fair. Well, no, they're technically correct. Once they're adults, like by all means, they need to provide a safe home for them to learn in. But once they're adults, you're on your own, that it's up to you. If you would like to be generous and make gifts, that's great. The other school of thought, which I quite liked from Warren Buffett, who's, giving away masses of his wealth while he's still alive, he wanted his kids to have enough to do anything, but not enough to do nothing. So when you're super wealthy, that's the idea. You don't want someone who just thinks everything's paid for. So I think he said something like $10 million was how much he left for each child, because that was enough for them to build whatever business they wanted, to create whatever they needed, but they couldn't just sit there and live off the interest. So
I guess it's all relative.
Well, yeah, these days. Exactly. But that was the theory. Now, this is a man who still lives in the house that he bought in 1960, drives the same car, that sort of stuff. So the kids did not grow up in plush surroundings. So I think there's that sort of, that's a different culture from what most people would have. So I'm just putting those out there as like ways of thought,
possible,
I guess.
Thinking.
Yeah, options, So I and then of course there's the philosophy of dying with zero. If you're going to gift it, you may as well gift it while you're alive. Because what's happening now is people are living longer. They're not selling their houses till the parents have died in their 80s or 90s. So they're getting the estate in the 50s or 60s. And by then they're already set up. The money would have been much more useful to them in their 20s or 30s. So that's that idea of giving it away earlier. There are plenty of people I know who've done that, who've swooped in and paid off a child's mortgage, or helped them get a property or bought them a parcel of shares. And you can certainly do that too if you want to. Making sure the kids understand how hard that was won, that it's not to be frittered away, and helping them, be able to steward that wealth so that it doesn't disappear is really important. So whichever process you pick, that's the one. If you've got really young kids and you're worried about you might pass away before they reach their majority, which is 18 in Australia, but some people would say don't let them make decisions with money until they're 25 or 30, that's fine as well, whatever you want. One tool to look to, I think, that if you've got significant assets, is a discretionary testamentary trust. So the discretionary part allows people to decide who gets paid out of what each year. There's no automatic, I'm owed this amount of money, I'm not a trust fund baby then. There's a trustee who decides how much is getting distributed and to who. That's the discretionary part. And then the testamentary is this trust only comes into being if you pass, so that there's all the documents sitting there. And why that's a really good tool is because it wraps everything up into a trust so the kids can't fritter away and whoever's looking after them can't fritter away. And so long as you've got a really good trustee in place, it's going to be stewarded through. And then there's a chance that, they'll inherit that at whatever age you set, 18, 21, 25, 30, whatever it is. And hopefully by then they've built up the skills to look after it. Definitely something for a lawyer. Definitely one for a lawyer. And I would also say if you're planning to gift children money throughout their lives, particularly if there's siblings and multiple people, keep really good records of that. Because there's nothing worse than mum and dad died. Oh, they gave you $100,000 for that house when you were 21. So we need to take 100 grand plus the indexing out of your share.
Yeah, I guess you don't think of how
so
these decisions on the way are going to affect the later.
Exactly.
Overall.
And so with the testamentary trust, you can set up one per child, and you can have an equalization clause that means that they get similar values. So, so that it's fair. So you can do all that in advance to reduce the likelihood of them arguing over things, and keeping really good records of what you do gift and what the terms were, and making that clear to everyone in the family so that there's no arguments, I think, are your best recipe for getting that right. But it's really up to you. I think, I've got some money put aside for my children that I haven't decided whether or not I will give to them as, shares or as a house deposit.
An option
and I haven't,
to.
Yeah, and I haven't told them.
But
so they better not listen to this episode when they're 18.
Where is that money
exactly.
Lacey was referring to?
I know, but it's in my name, and so I don't have to give it to them. But if I think they're working hard and I can help them in some way, it will be a privilege to be able to help them if I think it's worthwhile. But I don't know that it's necessarily the best thing for them, so I haven't really landed on that yet. So don't mention it to your kids if that's what you're planning, would be my advice, because you might change your mind in 5 or 10 years.
Yeah. Many people I speak to are kind of focusing on, well, I'm happy to pay for their education and you'll make it better than you might have had growing up, and or not have to take out that HEX debt that I certainly did as well. So that's an idea that sits pretty well with me. Like, if I'm going to pay for something, then that would probably be it.
Yeah, well, and it's a lovely gesture. And I think that what I guess I worry about for some parents, there might be people who are listening to this who think, I can't afford that to do that for my child. Does that make me a less, fair parent or whatever? And I wouldn't want any parent to think, because I can't do that, I'm not good enough, or I'm not. Don't think that. And I know that's not what you're saying. What I'm trying to do is say to people, if you aren't able to do that, you are not disadvantaging your child, I don't think. Like, a HEX debt is one of the most serviceable debts that you will ever get. It only kicks in when you're earning $47,000. Exactly. And it's only indexed to CPI. So it's the most generous debt. If your child has to get a HEX debt, I'd had the same as you had to get a HEX debt to go to university. It's not going to hamper them. They're not going to, not in any real sense, because it doesn't kick in until you're earning $47,000 a year. And then it's just this tiny percentage that comes out and you don't even notice it. So I wouldn't, don't beat yourself up if you're not in that position yet. If you're not financially, and this is, I think, really important, if you're not financially secure, if you're struggling to make ends meet, or you haven't started building your assets, you need to do that first before the children, because you don't want them to have to be paying for you. You don't want to be the reverse. You don't want to be coming to them for money. So you first, fill your cup first, you be safe first, and working towards financial independence, and then you can think about the kids. But if you don't get to the kids because you're busy with yourself and you haven't got there yet, you're no worse a parent. You're doing everything you can. Give them the skills and they will do it themselves. So don't beat yourself up.
Awesome. Well, that's a good place to finish, I think.
Oh, great. Well, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on again. And I'll be in touch when I have my next money challenge to get your input on.
Sounds like a plan. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Thanks for having me.
But how do people find out more? Because I checked out your website and I understand you've got a really great online program for raising financially savvy kids. So
yes,
we'll put details in the show notes, and that's really a really affordable one too. I think $47 at the moment at the time of recording. So that'll be an awesome one for people to get.
Yeah, no, it's set up so that parents can run through some activities they can do with their kids. So there's all the skills that I think they're important. So there's skills around money management, skills around investing, and I've put in a heap of activities. Some of them are theoretical. Some of them are, go to the local markets and do some bartering. Some of them are real. There's a real mix in there, and you're trying to help your kids learn those skills. So if you feel you don't really have the ability to give them those lessons, or you're not sure where you'd start, that's what it's for.
Great. Thanks for coming on. Chat to you next time.
Thanks for having me. Cheers. Bye.